Alright, so I got the gold foil tape installed over the factory insulation. It was damaged in some areas, so this just kind of closes it off and gives it some reflective properties also. This was after repainting the engine bay. Had to repair a little bit of surface rust where a battery had leaked on it. So I just went ahead and repainted the entire bay. Putting it back together, all the hardware will be nickel plated also. Alright, so you have to swap the motor mounts. This is the exhaust side mounts. This is the one that came on the Aristo, and this is the one that came on the Supra. For 14mm bolts. It goes there on the engine. I had to take loose the wastegate actuator, so 3 bolts there, vacuum line, and then also had to take loose the support on the bottom of the turbo manifold. There's a stud, and then the other bolt goes there. Alright, so intake side motor mount. This is the Aristo mount. Already have the Supra mount back up there. To get to it, basically you have to remove the oil filter housing. So do that by removing the union bolt. It also has a pressure sensor, and then also remove the manifold support bracket. And then there's 2 water lines on the oil filter housing, so you just have to remove both of those. And then there's a O-ring gasket that goes in the housing, and make sure you don't cut it when you take it apart. So I've got to get a new one of those now. Apparently it fell out of the groove and got pinched. So, alright, while we're over here on the intake side, since we swapped to the rear sump oil pan, the dipstick doesn't have a place to bolt up to. There's where it used to bolt up when it had the front sump. So we're just going to make a little bracket and bolt it down. Alright, so making the dipstick bracket, basically just cut the corner off of some 1/8 inch aluminum plate. Then we're going to drill a hole in it. That's going to be the hole that mounts to the manifold support, and then we'll mount it up and then match drill the top hole, install a nut insert into the bracket, and then bolt through that into the bracket, and that should get it. Alright, so we've got the bracket match drilled. Basically we line that up, made a pilot hole, drilled it out 3/8. We have a rib nut insert, so we'll insert that there. Basically that gives us a threaded hole, and then we can use a bolt to attach the dipstick tube to it. Okay, so we have a hand rivet tool. Basically you just put the rib nut on there. Yep, like so. Then you insert it into the part, make sure it's bottomed out. Give it a squeeze. It'll flare it into the hole, and then you just unscrew the mandrel. Okay, got the nut insert installed, and grab a bolt. Okay. Let me get a washer. get a bolt. Alright. Dipstick tube's nice and secure now. Alright, so we've got the ACT 6-clutch kit for a W58. It comes with the release bearing, alignment tool, have the pilot bearing, a little bit of lube for the splines. This is the 6-puck ceramic, I believe, clutch disc, and then this is the extreme pressure plate. Hopefully it has bolts in there also. If not, we can reuse the factory bolts. Okay, so first we'll install the pilot bearing into the twin turbo VVTi motor. Alright, so we have the pilot bearing. What I like to do is find a socket that matches the diameter exactly. This is a 23 millimeter. Give it a little extension, and what we're going to do is tap the pilot bearing into place. So we'll put a little bit of lubricant on the bearing just to help it slide in a little easier. Get it lined up. And then we'll give it just light taps. Want to make sure it doesn't go in crooked or you have all sorts of problems. Okay, looking pretty good. Yeah, so a quick tip, once you get your 23 millimeter socket, instead of putting it on the extension how you normally would, the tap here, if you flip this around, put it in the reverse, it gives you more surface area on the bearing, just to make sure you don't get it off-centered and damage the bearing. So it gives you more surface contact. So that's what it looks like with the bearing installed. Make sure you have it all the way in recessed. There's a stop, there's a little shoulder inside the crankshaft that it'll stop against. You'll be able to tell when you hit it. Alright, so we'll take a little bit of brake parts cleaner and we want to clean the surface of the firewall, make sure there's no leftover oil or grease residue. A little better. We'll do the same to the pressure plate. Make sure there's no leftover oil from when they machined it. It can cause clutch chatter or even slippage if it's enough buildup on there. So. Alright, and then so I'm apply just a little bit of the grease that they supply to the end of the alignment tool. This will go into the splines of the disc, and then once we get the assembly installed, we'll put just a little bit more on the input shaft on the transmission. Alright, and then we'll clean the pressure plate surface again, just to make sure there's no residual oil on it from any of their processes. Yep, let's one more time. Make sure it's nice and clean. It can never be too clean. Okay, then we'll set the assembly up. Put the disc inside the pressure plate with the alignment tool. Set the entire assembly onto the engine. Use a couple bolts to hold it in place. Put some blue Loctite on the other bolts. Switch them out. You'll see kind of how the process works. I always like to use the blue 242 Loctite on all the assemblies. It's kind of confusing now. For some reason they put blue Loctite and red Loctite in red tubes. So you just have to make sure to read. Make sure you're not using a permanent thread locker on something. Okay, so if you look at the clutch disc, they always have it marked. It says transmission side, so you want to make sure that it faces out. So we have a little bit of lubricant on there. Insert into the threads. The tool will insert into the pilot bearing, into the engine. That'll hold the disc up to the engine. That'll allow you to line the pressure plate. So the pressure plate, there's three dowels, and you can see how the alignment is, where there's two holes. One of them will be for the dowel, the other one will be for the bolt hole, or sorry, for the bolt. It's 3 locations, so you just have to align it as such. Slide it over the end of the alignment tool, get it aligned with the 3 dowel spots. Just start a bolt just to hold it in place. If it'll reach, but we'll have to tap it first. Let me get a rubber mallet so we don't damage anything. Let me try the hand first. Yeah. Okay. So, like we said, blue Loctite on these bolts. Have to look at the torque spec. ACT provided a sheet. Torque specs based on bolt diameter, so. We made sure that these bolts are already clean. They were relatively clean from taking them apart. Make sure to wipe off any oil and things. Otherwise, a Loctite won't be able to do its job if it can't grab hold of both surfaces of the threads. So. Okay, now that we've got those in, we'll torque them down to the correct spec. You can remove the alignment tool, and then we'll go to the transmission, install the new throwout bearing. The installation instructions, the torque requirements, M8's 26 pounds. We'll get the torque wrench set up. 26. 5. Okay, 26. Oops. Lock it. Probably can't see that, but nope. 26 pounds, and then we'll torque them in a star pattern again. Move this out of the way. Okay. Go back and double check, especially this one. Check, then we can remove the alignment tool and a little piece of fuzz off my paper towels. Okay, so that's set up. We'll move to the transmission. Alright, so replacing the throwout bearing. This is the old one. To get it off, there's this little spring wire keeper, so you can just pull each side out and that releases the bearing. We have the new one in here with the new keeper, and so that holds it onto the clutch fork, so it all moves as one unit. We'll put a little bit of lube on here on the splines and a little bit on the input shaft, and then we'll get ready to install the transmission onto the engine. Alright, so a little tip when putting the transmission on, you want to make sure that the dowels, of course, are lined up. But if you come to the back of the transmission, you can spin the output shaft. Get a light. You can spin the output shaft to get the splines to align with the clutch disc. You'll feel it when it does, and then it'll slide, the input shaft will slide into the pilot bearing, and basically once you get that, you can start putting all the bolts in. Just tighten them up evenly so it pulls the bell housing up to the engine evenly, nothing gets in a bind. Then tighten all those up. 2 on the bottom, we'll put those in once it's in the car. Be a lot easier to get to them.